English poem, which was turned into a song quite some time ago. So it's not one of the so-called popular songs. It has class. And I pair it with Tao Yuanming's 闲情赋, which is not very popular because lots of famous people in history said that he was terrible for writing such a thing. It's so indecent and erotic, and it just shows his low-grade personality character. So that's why not too many have heard of it, and it's just lovely, lovely. Okay, and these three things that I mentioned below, we're going to talk about them, but they were not particularly related to the subject, but it was related to other things we've talked about. And here's a list of vocabulary, the words that we mentioned the last week. And of all these words, only one has a red highlight, which is usurp, because I spelled it wrong last week. With an E, it should be an U, usurp, which is 篡位. And we're going to go through them, some in great detail, some just very casually going over. And before that happens, we're going to talk about 12-tone equal temperament. This is the so-called 12-tone equal temperament, and we call it in Chinese 12平均律. We mentioned probably in December or November when we sang the song Do Re Mi from The Sound of Music, and we went over some of the things in music that are common knowledge so that we can learn some common popular words in English that we know in Chinese, but maybe not necessarily in English. And this is a keyboard, and you can assume that it's in the middle of a piano with the left end C representing the center C or middle C. Anyway, this is a C that it's sitting right in the middle of an 88 key keyboard or piano. And on the right hand side, there's another C, and that's called an octave away from the two C's are an octave away, O C T A V E 就是个八度音的意思. And between these two notes, we divide it into 12 equal parts. If you count all the keys, counting this one as the first one, and the C sharp as the second one, and going on like this, and there are 12 notes. Is it 12 notes? Maybe it's the 13 notes. Anyway, when we do the tree planting arithmetic questions, we always know that there are one more tree than there are spaces in between. So I assume there are 13 notes with 12 spaces in between. 我在说的是质数问题哈。So there are 12 spaces between these two C's, and we divide this difference into 12 parts. So each note, consecutive notes would be of equal length from each other throughout the entire system. And this is something that we intuitively know. When the teacher told us do re mi fa sol la ti do, it comes sort of naturally. You know these are the notes. However, they're not exactly that natural. If you look at this, that's another way to represent this 12 notes is on this treble musical square, musical what's the word to use? Anyway, you have this from C, which is the center, C in the middle, C, and this C, which is an octave away from it, higher than it. And these are the 12 notes that are equally spaced among themselves. And so you divide the octave into 12 parts, all of which are equally tempered, which means equally spaced. And this distance between the two neighboring notes, it turns out to be, here I have this enlarged here as a picture because I could not copy that as text. So it's 2, the 12th root of 2 就是2的12次方, and it's equal to 1.05946 and so on and so forth. And the great Chinese mathematician, he discovered that no later than 1581. Okay, so that's why we're going to talk about him today. The two neighboring nodes are apart by a ratio of 1.05946, etc. This interval is called a half step or 半音. So each note, if you go up half a step, you go to the next one, and so on and so forth. After 12 steps, you reach the end of the octave, and that's a whole thing, okay? And from this chart, which we also discussed last time in December or November, this is how you define each note with A4 on top, A4 meaning the fourth A on an 88 key piano. That's A4, say it's here. Then it's 440 hertz. And if you go to the other end of the octave, you reach the bottom of this chart, which is an A5, and it is 880 hertz. So A5 is exactly twice as many frequency as A4. That is the space you use to divide into these 12 places. We know that in ancient China, we already have sets of bells and sets of this bianzhong. This is called the bianzhong, which is a set of bells. And this is called bianqing. Qing is another kind of instrument, musical instrument. So this is a set of bianqing. And by knocking on these things or on those things, you will get a series of notes that's exactly the 12 notes, the 12 equally tempered notes. So it's no secret that the Chinese knew the 12 temperament system existed, as these musical instruments already existed in at least 春秋, the spring and autumn period. But they're not so exactly right, according to our the root, 12th root of 2. They are not exactly right. They were nearly correct, but not exactly right. So in Guanzi, which is Guanzhong, the philosophy of Guanzhong is his book. When we say 子, that means the book written by a philosopher about his life philosophy or political stand or whatever. So 我们说诸子的时候，就是这个春秋战国时代的哲学家所写的书，而 Guanzi is a person who wrote this book, and he was Qi Huangong the council. Okay, so 齐桓公就是first you had 三家分晋，就是 three states divide 晋。晋 was a state or it's not a dynasty, it's a state in spring and autumn period. And as it goes into 战国, which is a warring states period, the Qi state split into three, and the Guanzi is maybe you can call him a prime minister or a counselor, chancellor, or whatever. He was the first among all the officials under Qi Huangong. And in his book, he mentioned that there are 12 equally tempered notes within an octave. The way he mentioned, he discussed how it was obtained was very, very, very close to what we know now. However, the math did not actually get it. So they knew that there are 12 notes equally tempered, but they don't know exactly how it was divided until Zhu Zaiyu. Zhu Zaiyu is the person right under here, under the second one. He's in the Ming Dynasty, so it is a much, much later, almost probably more than 2,000 years later than Guanzi. And he was a mathematician and a music theoretical theorist. And he definitively defined these 12 equal temper notes are spaced apart by the 12th root of 2. That is an amazing accomplishment. And he published it in 1580. And he not only published this book, he also published many, many other important books involving mathematics and music and the calendar. So we Chinese were the first in the world to definitively tell people how to define these 12 notes since Zhu Zaiyu in 1580. And in Europe, some people started to approach this number. The earliest was in 1620 and some in 1638 and some even later. And finally, they got it right, but it was 40 or 60 years after Zhu Zaiyu. So Zhu Zaiyu was the first and the most accurate person to define the 12 notes within an octave. We know that at that time, Meteorology was the Italian missionary who came to China, and he died in 1610. So in his writings, he mentioned Zhu Zaiyu doing this thing. But whether he passed this along to the European academics or scholars or whatever, we could not find any proof that he did that. But gradually, European people started to find out this, and they adopted quickly, whether by themselves or by getting some kind of books passed from China along the Silk Road to Europe. We don't know. There was no proof. And we all know that Johann Sebastian Bach, 就是巴哈, 巴哈一家有, he had many, many siblings and offsprings that they all have the last name Bach. But Johann Sebastian Bach was the most famous of them. And he composed numerous musical pieces, and an important part was I think it was harpsichord music. That's called the 12-tempered system or something. So we know that Johann Sebastian Bach knew about this theory, but that was like 100 years after Zhu Zaiyu. Zhu Zaiyu was born in 1536 and he died in 1611. He was a prince in the court. And exactly what kind of prince? He was the 8th generation grandson or great grandson of Zhu Yuanzhang, who was the first emperor of Ming Dynasty. And he was not the main line, not the crown prince, and not Yan Wang, who was not the crown prince, but he killed everyone else so that he could become the emperor. And the Zhu Zaiyu was not under this line, but he was one of the great grandson of Zhu Yuanzhang. And he studied astronomy and arithmetics and at an early age. And there's something that happened to his father, who was one of the princes, of course. And the father was wrongly accused of a crime and was imprisoned. And Zhu Zaiyu was very loyal to his father. So for 19 years, when the father was in prison, he just made a mud shed outside the palace, and he slept there for 19 years until his father was released. Then he was willing to go into the court. During this period, he studied music and mathematics and the calendars. After his father passed away, he turned down this position, the aristocratic peerage position for his family. Maybe he was to inherit some kind of fortune and fiefdom, but fiefdom 就是他的封地哈， and 他就like the Meghan Markle and Prince Harris, they decided to savor their relationship. They did not want to be paid as a royalty. And Zhu Zaiyu did the same thing, just like Prince Harry right now. And so he became a scholar in his own right, not wanting to have anything to do with the court. Here I have my fiefdom. Okay, fiefdom is a word about a royal person, an aristocrat, the land that was given to this baron or duke or something to be his. Okay, he would be the lord over his fiefdom, and he would be the judge and the administrator, and he would just have lots of people working in the city or the farm and be his subordinates. Okay, so this person Zhu Zaiyu, he wrote many books, and in one of them he mentioned that this 12 equal temperament, he came up with this number, which is the 12th root of the number 2. And he calculated into 25 digits behind the decimal point. 这个小数点叫做一个 decimal point. Okay. Decimal point. Okay. He also did a lot of musical treatise books, and he composed the music. Okay, So he was something quite extraordinary, whom I've never heard of until a week ago. I also came across two other things in the past week. One is that our Bremerton in Washington state, the city of Bremerton is seeking public input on the proposal of naming a street or a square after Quincy Jones, Quincy Jones Jr. He's still alive, 1933. He was born in 1933, and he was a person who conducted the song that we studied last week, which is "We Are the World." And you could see in the entire video that he was the one standing in front of everybody with the baton and doing that as a conductor. So that's his name, Quincy Jones. He was a native of Washington state, and Bremerton proposed to name a street or Quincy Jones Way. That's a street, or Quincy I'm sorry, Quincy Square. That would be a square. Square 就是一个广场了哈。So these are the two options the city proposed to name in their city because he used to live there. And in an interview at the late night show by the host Stephen Colbert in 2016, Quincy Jones mentioned how he grew up and in Bremerton, and he lived on the project. When you say he lived on the project, you mean that his family was so poor that they lived in the government constructed tenement building. They lived in an apartment in it, paying very little rent. That's what a project is. And there was a movie called The Florida Project, which was a recent movie about the people who live in the project in Florida, I guess. I haven't seen that, but it's got quite a buzz.
Hey, Joe, this is Sophia.
Yes.
So in Boston, they're at Quincy Market. Is it something to do with him?
I don't think so, but I will look into that. Quincy Market.
I would think that may have something to do with the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, I thought anything in Boston has something to do with the new.
Probably Quincy Adams.
Yeah, Quincy Adams. Yeah, probably. I don't know. John Quincy Adams or John Adams. They were, I don't know, father and son or nephew. Yeah, they were two of the United States presidents in very early on. I think John Adams was the second. So now let's go back to this. At this late night comedy show, he was interviewed, and he said when he was living in a housing project, he wandered into a community room, like a shared room, like a study hall or for relaxation or something. And he saw a piano, which he has never seen before. And he was not educated. He was a child with very little experience of the outside world. He never knew that people could have musical instruments. So he saw this piano and he was amazed. And when touching the keys, he could make sounds. And he said at the end of the slide, so I went over to that piano slowly and I touched it. And every cell in my body said, this is what you are going to do the rest of your life. So that experience really inspired him to become a devoted person in the music industry, even though up to that time, he had never seen any musical instrument at all. So that's a very interesting story in the news last week. Another interesting story is about Chloe Zhao. She was born in 1982, and if you watch the Golden Globe Award on Sunday, you will see that she and her movie Nomadland won best picture and best director. Those are the two biggest awards in any award show. So she became instant sensation, even though she had been collecting lots of awards in the past, say, half a year. Since that movie came out, she was awarded many notable awards, such as in Venice Film Festival. She won the Golden Lion, that is awarded to the director or to the producer of the best movie they could find for this movie. So she became very famous. There are many, many other awards she got. And for this Golden Globe Award, which is arguably the best, the biggest award of the year up to this point, because this leads to SAG Award and Oscar and so on. So in this award, by getting these two awards, she became the second woman and the first Asian woman to ever become the best director at Golden Globe Award. So that was quite something. Yeah, she already won the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival, which is one of the big three. The big three would be Berlin and Cannes and Venice. Okay, it's a kind of difficult for me to pronounce it. And this is you look at it, she looks like a little high school girl, but a little older, because she is like 40, not quite 40, okay, 38 years old. So I went out and found a prettier picture of her. Yeah, I did a screenshot on one of the YouTube videos. This is quite a dashing picture of her. And if you have watched that award show, you will know that Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, again, were the pair who, I would say, who were master of ceremonies. They were the two joint masters of ceremonies at that show, huh? So when people say MC, or you can say it, spell it as EMCEE, which is actually the sound of it, MC. And that means a master of ceremony, 就是一个节目，一个很大的节目, a big award show or conference or convention, the host or hostesses of such a ceremony or event or a performance. So these two people I just mentioned, who are Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, they again hosted this award show, and they did a fine job. But this is the first time it's a bi-coastal event, because one of them is the East Coast and one of them in the West. So it is quite extraordinary. And they did lots of camera tricks to make you feel that they were actually together. So this is the beginning of the award show season. And I, being a big movie fan, I pay a lot of attention to the award shows. So you are going to see a lot of award shows, such as SAG Award, which is a Screen Actors Guild, 就是演剧工会的奖哈。They as members of the guild, guild 就是一个工会哈。Guild. So the SAG Award is a Screen Actors. Sorry, I deleted it. Okay, Screen Actors Guild. These are not one word. Guild is 工会 and SAG is Screen Actors Guild. And they give out award soon after Golden Globe Award. On the other hand, I did not yet mention what Golden Globe Award is. It is, let me see, Hollywood Foreign Press Association, okay, HFPA. So it's an association of journalists who were sent by many other countries to Hollywood to cover their news. So, for example, if you're a foreign country, you want your citizens to know things about the world. So if you are a foreign newspaper or TV station, you should probably send out reporters or journalists. Reporters and journalists are more or less the same thing. 就是记者的意思哈. So you send out journalists to other countries. Where do you send them to? You send them to, for example, United States. You cannot send them hundreds of them over here because that costs you too much money. So where do you send them? You would send one at least to cover the White House and the things that's happening in Washington, D.C. So that is one you definitely should have. And then you probably would send one to New York, and you would definitely want someone to cover Hollywood because it is one big cultural identity in the United States that you don't want to miss. So there are hundreds of foreign press members in this association covering Hollywood news. So that they every year would vote to give awards to, to people in the movie or TV and other industries. They're different from, their scopes are different from Oscar because Oscar is strictly about movies, but Golden Globe Award, they do movies and the TV and maybe something else. Okay. So this is the three things I want to mention before I go to the vocabulary. And the first word is Holocaust. We've seen this word several times. It was originally in a Jewish word that means sacrifice in ancient times. But ever since Nazi killed millions of Jews in an act of genocide committed by Nazi Germany. Yeah, German people would not want you to say it was Germany. They would always say it's Nazi Germany because this party no longer exists, so they can blame someone else. So Nazi Germany under Hitler killed 6 million European Jews. And that is a huge Holocaust to the Jewish people. So since then, they decided to use this ancient word Holocaust to describe this event. So these are very old words, but used in a new way. Now we just use Holocaust as this event, and we forget it was a very, very old word. The next word is docent, which I translated into 讲座教授, which is never what we know this word for, because it was a European word, and in Europe, it is a title at some university to mean a specific academic appointment similar to an associate professor. So if you're in Europe, when you say docent, it invariably means an associate professor of some sort. And in each country and in each university, the definition or requirement could be different, but they all use the word docent. However, when this word jumped over to United States, it means a tour guide at a museum or art gallery or a historical site. So when you go to a museum and there are tour guides there showing you around, they are called docents. I've been to a botanical garden in Berkeley, UC Berkeley. They have a big botanical garden, and there was one of the docent who no longer, well, he passed away, and he was my in-laws, my daughter's in-laws. My daughter married their son, so I knew this word earlier than today. Okay, but now you go to most places which is not so commercialized, and they want to have a more sophisticated word to describe their tour guide. They decided to use the word docent, which in Europe nobody uses it this way. And this word docent was related to these words: doctor, doctrine, document, and indoctrinate. This all has this DOC in it. And the next word is spinster, which is an old maid. Here I say synonym, old maid, 就是a woman who's not married, past her marrying age. Sometimes it's used to describe a woman derogatorily. That this word means 看不起的意思哈。You look down upon the person. You dismiss such a person as being not attractive enough to get a husband. But it becomes less so nowadays when people are often not married or divorced very often, and the social norms are changing. So spinster is not so derogatory a word. And 剩女 is something new, actually. I have rarely heard about it, but it's used on mainland China to describe such a woman. And another use for this word is totally different from this, which is the third bullet, which says one who spins. Spin is like this. You have a spinning wheel, which is a 纺纱机. There's a woman sitting in front of a spinning wheel, and by spinning this wheel around and around, she makes the thread made of wool or cotton thinner and tighter and better. So traditionally, you would gather cotton or wool, O-W-O-O-L, or silk, and you would spin it on a spinning wheel so that it becomes better and better. And let's go back to this slide, which says a spinster is used to describe a person who spins. For example, you have a presidential candidate who just said something wrong, and the people are just beating him to death in the news about how wrong he was. Then came his spinster, who would spin the story in different ways to make it feel like it's different, it's better, it's good. For example, he said something terrible, and the spinster in his camp would say, oh no, he didn't really mean that. He actually means this, which is better, which is good, and so on and so forth. So the spinsters are people who spin the yarn so it becomes a better thing, even though originally it's not so good. So this is what a spinster is in a very political meaning. Okay. The next word is fiance. The first word with one E is the man who was engaged to be married. And the second word has two E's. That is because you need to add an E to the first word to mean that it's a female. So the one with two E's would mean that this woman was engaged to be married. Okay, that's because they were French words to begin with. But nowadays, people are not too familiar with French grammar, and they would often use it not correctly. So you cannot trust what you read right now. This word is called convert. And we were talking about, not Byron. Who were we talking about? We were talking about someone who converted from one religion to another. So convert means to change something into another thing. So it can be used in many, many different ways. For example, you convert from Christian to Islamism or to become a Muslim. So you change your religion to another one or to a Buddhism, okay? So that's one way of converting. Another way is you can convert your garden into a tennis court. So it's the same place, but it has a different use. And you can change American dollars into euros or into sterling pounds. That is, it's still the same amount of money in value, but it's in a different denomination or a different currency in another country. That's a way of conversion. And the last one is a kind of unit that are different. For example, Fahrenheit and Celsius, that's a temperature. When you measure the temperature in this country, we use Fahrenheit, which is 华氏, and in most other countries, they use Celsius, which is 摄氏. So you would convert one to another, and you need to know the formula in order to do the conversion, or you can just use your computer or cell phone, and it'll tell you how to change into a different one. And also from the English system of pound and miles and feet and so on into the metric system, which has a kilogram or meters or what else? Miles, yeah. Kilometers and things like that. So this is a word convert, used to convert one thing into another. But the one way we do not encounter too often, and it is here why I put it here, is about religion. Other kinds of conversion we encounter all the time, but we rarely come across a situation where one person changed the belief into another. So in this case, it's either a transitive verb in which one person or system try to change another person's religion, or it can be an intransitive verb in which one person out of his own heart, he changed from one religion to another. So it can be both 及物动词 and 不及物动词. The next one, I want to spend a lot more time on it, so I listed in the second slide. Kidnap is 绑架. Last time I described that a person, in the beginning it was a child, and now it's used for adult as well. A person was forcefully taken in order to get his or her loved one to pay a ransom. Ransom is a 赎票, 赎金, in order to squeeze the parents to give out a large amount of money so that you could return this child, or maybe not a child, back to his loved ones or her. In the beginning, the word kid was the child. And in the old days, the meaning of kidnap since 17th century was to steal children to provide servants to the American colonies. That's quite a strange source, origin of this word. So there are American colonies, for example, in the Philippines, or in in Hawaii or something, or somewhere in the Caribbean island like St. John or other places. Any American colonies, you would need to use free servants. Then there are people who go out and steal children and sell to you so that you can have a free servant for the entire life of the child. But more and more, this kind of thing never happens anymore, and more it is being used to describe other criminal acts instead of the meaning involving American colony and the servants. And the most famous kidnapping in the United States was the kidnap of Limber baby kidnapping in 1932. After this incident, the US Congress passed a law allowing the FBI to investigate all kidnappings. So anytime there's a kidnapping, automatically FBI would step in to do the investigation. Usually FBI would let each state handle all their criminal investigations, but kidnapping is one of a very few that the law says that the FBI would step in right away. Nowadays, a kidnap is no longer referring to kids only. It can be adults. But there's another word, abduction, which has very similar meanings and very subtle differences. And we're going to talk about it a little later. And before the Limber baby kidnapping, there were many others, not even related to American colonies. And this is one of them, Il Trovatore, which means the troubadour. And it's a Giuseppe Verdi opera called the troubadour. In Chinese, we call it 游唱诗人 or 吟游诗人. It is a poet or a singer who travel from village to villages and sings stories about things. And in this opera, there was one main character who's a troubadour who won the heart of the princess, or if not a princess, maybe a baron's, I don't know, just one of the aristocrats. But the baron's son, real son, also fell in love with the same woman. So the two men are competing for the love of one woman, and they turn out to be brothers, though they did not know it. And the original Count Luna had two sons, the elder one and the younger one, but the younger one, when he was a baby, was kidnapped by a gypsy woman. That's how the story goes. And this Lindbergh and his wife, Anne Morrow, here's a picture of them. I bet many of you have heard of Lindbergh, Charles Lindbergh. When you say C-H-A-S, which means Charles, because everybody know a very common first name is Charles. So when you say Charles, you can spell it as a C-H-A-S. Charles Lindbergh is a handsome young man, and overnight he became a sensation in the whole world, so famous that every eligible woman wanted to marry him, and he was not married. And eventually he picked this beautiful and wonderful and rich woman and moral to be his wife, after people were trying to match him with Anne's elder sister. This is quite a common theme in romantic stories. When a sister was being matched to a handsome young man, the sister's younger, the woman's younger sister eventually snapped up this eligible bachelor. And here on the right-hand side of this screen, you can see this poster announcing Charles Lindbergh's son being kidnapped by, no, they don't know whom. Yeah, they saw a ladder leaning against the back of their house, but they did not see who did the kidnapping. And this is the whole thing, saying what happened, what happened, and this are the pictures of the baby, and how to contact each person, the police, and so on. Here's another picture of this handsome young man. He was 25 years old in front of the single engine airplane. We call it a monoplane because it does not have double wings. It just has one layer of wing. This is an airplane called the Spirit of Louis, of St. Louis. St. Louis is a place in America, but not about Louis XIV or XVI in France. So he named his airplane the Spirit of St. Louis, and at age 25 in 1927, he flew his plane by himself. It's a solo non-stop flight. Did not stop anywhere, from New York City to Paris, and being the first person in the world to ever do this wonderful accomplishment. He won a huge prize. There was a prize money involved, and he entered this prize competition and won this prize. Before him, there were airplanes flying from New York City to Paris, but they were not solo flights. There were at least two people on the plane, and the Lindbergh was a single person doing this. Okay. However, after this very tragic event, because his child was found dead later, and he was inundated by all these newspapers and lots of people trying to disturb his life. So he was so disgusted, he and his wife packed up and left for Paris, and they lived there for the rest of their lives. For him, it's almost half a century he lived outside the United States. And he was famous for something else, which made him very, very shunned. We say shunned. There's an S there. Shun is a verb, meaning people in the community all avoided him or looked at him as a bad person or something. We shun him, or we treat him as a pariah. That is 一个社会里面的被赶出去的人。Why is that? Because he was in Paris, and Hitler, being a fan of him, being a fan of his, okay, you would say being a fan of his, invited him to show around in some military establishment, and he went along to make a visit of many of the Army and the Navy and whatever, Air Force base and so on. as a result, he was so alarmed at their military force that he said, we, America, should never wage a war with Germany because there's no chance we could win the war against Germany. They're so strong and so well prepared. So he, having a huge reputation, many people were listening to him. He became an idol or a representative of isolationist. That's the word under here. Isolationist is a person who advocates isolation. He wants the United States to stay away from the world events, not to be involved in the coming world war, world war, okay? It's like how does it say, a tongue twister, huh? That's why I always say WW2, huh? Just World War II, huh? So he activated that America should isolate itself. And that's not a very popular stand. Eventually, America jumped into the war and fought a bloody war for a long time. And people hated her for doing that. If you know him and describe him in a more beautiful way, you would call him a pacifist. A pacifist is a person who's against the war, who is for peace, while an isolationist is one person who advocates that the country should separate itself from other countries, do your own thing, and not go with the flow. Now, these are the different words. And there are several other famous kidnaps in the United States. One is John Paul Getty III in 1974. John Paul Getty is the grandson of John Paul Getty. So his father is John Paul Getty II, and his grandfather is John Paul Getty, period. Okay. So in 1973, this 16-year-old young boy was kidnapped by some kind of a mafia group in Italy while he was in Rome. And the criminals demanded $17 million payment for his safe return. And this boy has not been behaving well, and he's constantly asking his parents for more money. So the family suspected that there was no criminal involved but their son. They think the son faked the kidnapping and wrote the ransom note and asked for money so that he could get away with a huge amount of ransom. Unfortunately, his grandfather, J. Paul Getty, that's the name he goes by. The grandfather was very, very miserly. A miser is a 守财奴, a person who usually is a wealthy person. He would not want to spend money as much as possible. He's very miserly, and the grandfather refused to pay anything because he said he has 13 grandchildren, and each one of them could conceivably plan this kind of thing and target him for a huge amount of money. He would be bankrupt if he ever did that. So he would not pay for it. And pretty soon, the family received in the mail a lock of hair, 一卷头发, a lock of hair. For example, some women would have a lock of hairs either on the forehead or on the side. That would mean they were twisted into curls, so it's called a lock of hair. And they also received a human ear. Of course, it's a bloody real ear, not anything artificial, in the mail. Not them, but they were sent to the newspaper. So the criminals means business, they say. Here is your grandson's ear, and if you don't do anything, you will soon see other parts of his body. And of course, this makes it very clear that it's not his grandson's plan to get money. So they they negotiated with the criminals back and forth and reduced the ransom to $3 million. However, J. Paul Getty was very stingy, and he said he would pay 2.2 million, and the father, who is his son, would pay the rest, because $2.2 million is tax deductible as a ransom. Anything more than that, he would not get tax deduction out of it. So he would not pay that much. So he only paid 2.2. However, he does have the $800,000 he could loan to his son at 4% interest. So that's an amazingly miserly person, huh? He could easily afford the 3 million, but he would only pay 2.2 because it's tax deductible. Well, the rest of it, he put it out for his son as a loan at 4% interest. Boy, his grandson was found alive after the ransom was paid. If you want to know more about it, you could go watch the movie. That's The Last Bullet, which is All the Money in the World, a 2017 movie. And this poor grandson was scarred for life after this incident. He did nothing good ever since. He was a drug addict, and he died of drug overdose at age 54 and had a miserable life. And this movie was on the right-hand side. It's on the right-hand side. You can see at the bottom, All the Money in the World. And you could see Michelle Williams and Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg plays one of the detectives, and Michelle Williams played the mother of the grandson, who was divorced from the father already. And Michelle Williams, who was a girlfriend of Heath Ledger, who died of an overdose, and she won an Oscar as a supporting actress for this movie, I believe. And she was nominated many times. She was very good. And who plays the grandfather? It was Christopher Plummer. Here I have Christopher Plummer, 1929 to February 5th, 2021. So he died a little less than a month ago. And we all knew him playing the father in the movie The Sound of Music with Julie Andrews. He had a huge, how do you say, when you do his filmography, it's a very, very long list with many prestigious movies. Well, Julie Andrews is very famous as an actress. She only did a handful of movies, and probably less than 10. I shouldn't say less than a handful. It's more than 5, but less than 10 probably. But she is so popular that she is more famous than Christopher Plummer. Okay, let's go to the next kidnap, which is a kidnap of Patty Hearst. Patty Hearst was born in 1954, and she is still alive. She was kidnapped in 1974 by a very rarely known organization called the Symbionese Liberation Army. Yeah, during the 70s, there were a lot of organizations advocating different things, calling themselves Liberation Army. And who is Patty Hearst? She is the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst. That is a big name in newspaper. He used to own all the newspapers in the country, every city, every state, every big city. I mean, small cities, he didn't care. Every big city has a William Randolph Hearst newspaper. So he is hugely influential and he has a lot of money. His home is changed to a castle on the West Coast called the St. Simeon Castles. And you can go visit it, but you have to book a ticket online beforehand. Otherwise, you cannot just go there and buy a ticket. It's a palace by the sea on the cliff. And he's rich and famous and influential politically and financially. And you can imagine for a person to be this powerful, he has to be pretty bad. Okay. So there was a movie about him called Citizen Kane, done by Orson Welles. I was going to do this later, but it's here. Okay. This movie is called Citizen Kane. On the right-hand side, you could see that Orson Welles was standing in front of his own picture and he was playing the leading character, Citizen Kane. And of course, he's talked about many of the bad things William Randolph Hearst did. And it made Hearst extremely angry. And he swore that Orson Welles will never find a job in Hollywood for the entire life. So even though Orson Welles was worshipped now by the entire movie industry as a god, he was very poor and could not find any job and could only do odds and ends. He did not do very many movies, but ended quite miserably, actually, all because he took on William Randolph Hearst as his enemy. And on the left-hand side, you see another movie poster called Mank, M-A-N-K. This is a very recent movie done just now, last year, and it's in competition in many, many award shows as the best picture, best actor, the actresses, and the script writing, and so on. Lots of nominations. And it is about the person, Herman Mankiewicz. He wrote the script for Citizen Kane for Orson Welles. So this is a good movie too. I've seen both, of course, and Citizen Kane I probably saw 3 times. If you consider yourself a movie fan, a movie buff, someone who's really interested in watching movie, you cannot do without having watched Citizen Kane. It is like a Bible. You have to watch that movie. Although the other movie, but Mank, you can skip. It was less than what I expected. Okay, so this is about William Randolph Hearst. And here we have this granddaughter being kidnapped. And she was not found until 19 months later. She was caught, arrested as a bank robber, because during that time she was under captive. She participated in their bank robbery activity and was eventually caught by the police. And of course, her family being so rich and famous, they put out no stops. They put no stops to buy the best defense, legal defense. They hired F. Lee Bailey as her defense lawyer, the richest or most famous defense lawyer in the world. Okay, and so she got off somewhat, but not entirely. Actually, she was sentenced to probably 19 years, I guess. Anyway, here's a mugshot of when she was captured. They took police mugshot. Huh? We use the word MUG to describe this kind of pictures when somebody gets arrested, and they would take a mugshot of a person, and in front of the picture you will see this name, San Mateo Sheriff Hearst, Patty Patricia Hearst, huh? That's her date of birth, 1975, and the number is the arrest number, and the front and the side view of the person. And usually there's a measurement showing how tall she is, so it's easier to identify her. And they also published this surveillance camera footage taken at the bank where they robbed, and you see that person at the far end. That was Patty Hearst. She did the bank robbery with her captors, and of course her family claims that she was being kept for so long and brainwashed and fearing for her life and safety, and she had to do it. However, at the scene, she was making very active. Her behavior did not look like she was afraid or being constrained in any way. Anyway, so this first bullet says 2 months after she was released, she married the policeman who was her security detail during the time on bail. And in 1976, she was convicted and sentenced to 35 years in prison, which was later reduced to 7 years. And then President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence. So that would be in 76. She was to stay in prison till 1983. And Jimmy Carter must have commuted her in 80. So she was reduced. Her sentence was reduced by 3 years. If at that time she was still in prison, I assume she was. But still she has a criminal record, which is not erased until she was pardoned by President Bill Clinton. By pardoning her, she would have her criminal record erased. So now she could go out and get jobs easier, and she could rent an apartment, and when they check her credit check, it would not show any criminal record. So that's a good thing. So being the granddaughter of a rich and famous person, of course, by that time, her grandfather was probably dead. And this is the word for tacked onto the word kidnap. Ransom. Ransom is the money the criminal demanded in order to return the hostage, in order to free the hostage. And I promised that I would talk about abduction. Abduction is very similar to, that's my, I don't know, okay. Kidnap and abduction, similar words that can be used interchangeably. However, kidnap is usually with ransom. People wanted ransom in order to do this kidnap. However, abduction is not necessarily for ransom. The obvious example would be a divorced couple, parents of a child who are divorced, and the child would be living with one parent instead of the other, and the other parent usually would design some kind of abduction to kidnap this child so the child can be living with the other parent instead. So this kind of abduction, you don't see any ransom being demanded. Another thing is another word is a hostage. Hostage is a little different from kidnap or abduction. A hostage usually involves more than one victim, and as a result, you cannot take this one a group of people like 10 or 20 or even 100 people as hostage by moving them away, escaping on the vehicle or something. So hostage taking become a situation similar to kidnapping and abduction, but it stays there because all these hostages were sitting ducks. They could not be transported to other places until this hostage taker demand an airplane to be docked somewhere so that they could have safe conduct protection to move all the hostages to the airport and load on this airplane and fly to a friendly country. So that's the situation called hostage. And hostage is usually more than one person, but sometimes is also a hostage. Is also a one person victim situation. For example, a political hostage, which happens quite often in China as well as in many other countries in old days. You would have two hostile parties, for example, how do you say? 比方说楚汉相争 or 三国打仗的时候 you have different parties of similar status, especially in 春秋 or 战国时代 they would exchange their crown prince or somebody so that you can make sure that they don't engage in war, because once the war starts, they will start to kill this hostage, and then neither country would be happy. So this is called the hostage exchange situation. And for example, Jiang Jingguo was a hostage. He was taken to Russia as a hostage with agreement by his father, Chiang Kai-shek, because he came into some kind of agreement with Russia. At that time, it's Soviet Union. And they took Jiang Jingguo as a hostage. As a result, he married a Russian woman because he lived there when he was young. That's a hostage situation. So hostage may not be one-sided hostage taking. It could be a political agreement that you would exchange a hostage prince or something. Okay. So these are the various situations among kidnap, abduction, and hostage taking. Here is one that I'm just going to say very simply. To ratify an agreement or a law is to give the final consent to it. For example, last time we talked about the 22nd Amendment, about presidential term limit in United States. It was law approved by the Congress and ratified by each state. So each state has the obligation of either ratifying it or not ratifying it. And if you collect enough states that ratified this law, then this law becomes official law. If not, then it's not a law, even though the Congress approved it. So this thing was approved several years later down the road. So amendment became the 22nd Amendment. And some of the failed agreement are as follows. I am naming two examples. One is League of Nations. In 1918, President Woodrow Wilson made 14 点, I believe, 14 points, his proposal of 14 points that each nation should become a nation because of their ethnic determination. 我们叫做民族自觉. So even though there are many, many regions in the world being colonized by big countries like UK or France or something, or United States, but they, as a group of people, they could decide their future by voting to determine that they want to not be a colony. So this is one of the things that made President Wilson, so popular, because so many people in the world are willing to fight for, say, United Kingdom or France or other countries, so that at the end of the war, they can decide to become a free country. So to have a free country is so coveted by all the many small parts of the world that Woodrow Wilson became their idol, even though Woodrow Wilson himself is a terrible racist. But he advocated for all the tribes to become nations by self-determination. And among his 14 points proposals, one is to found a League of Nations, which is an organization of many, many countries in the world. Together, they should discuss things, negotiate situations, and decide what to do when a member nation is doing something wrong, or a member nation is being taken advantage of. So a League nation is an idealistic entity, a worldwide organization proposed by Woodrow Wilson so that there will never be a world war, okay? So United States is the country that proposed the League of Nations. However, this was not ratified by United States. The Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, they decided they are not going to join the League of Nations. That's why this proposal was not ratified by United States. So the League of Nations, we call it 国际联盟, in Chinese, 国际联盟. It became an organization that is so idealistic, but without United States in it, it's just not going to last long at all. And it failed. And another thing proposed or approved by the Congress is ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, which gives women the same rights as men. In the late 70s, it went out to each state to be ratified, but it failed to garner enough votes. Less than 38 states, I believe it was 36 or something. Not enough states ratified this amendment, so it never became law. We still do not have an equal right amendment. And if you're interested in that, you could go on, I don't know whether it's Netflix. I think it's Netflix. They produced a TV series called Mrs. America. It's a story of Phyllis Fletcher. I don't know, Phyllis something. Anyway, she almost single-handedly defeated ERA. She was depicted as a terrible woman in this very, very long narrative of the entire process of ERA not being able to pass the ratification. Okay, the next word is usurp, which I had the red letter in the list. It is someone who is not supposed to be the ruler, but he took the claim by force. So it's called the 篡位. So he did it illegitimately. So it's an illegal act. Someone else was legally inheriting this throne or was legally chosen to be the president or similar things. And along came someone else, such as Donald Trump. He wanted to stay as president. If he succeeded, he would be able to usurp the presidency and became again the president, which he was not legally elected to be. So this is the word called usurp. These are the three words you should know because it's easy. You only need to know the three prefix. One is mono, which means one. The second is a, which means not. And the third one is pan, which is widely held. And the second part of the word is theism. It means a religion. So monotheism is the religion that worship one God, and atheism is a non-religion, people who do not believe there is a God. And the pantheism is the religion in which people believe there are more than one God. There are several gods, for example, the sun, the ocean, the tree, or the animal, a lion, or whatever. Or some people could also be one of the pantheism's God. Okay, I tried to explain them a little further, but I deleted all the slides because it's just too convoluted for me to understand. We're coming to the second one, which is baptism. And this is a picture of baptism by St. Peter. And St. Peter on the left-hand side, he has a ring on top of his head, meaning he is a saint. And of course, it's not a literal ring. It was figuratively. And he is sprinkling water on this person kneeling before him who wore very little and was probably kneeling in water, as I could see that his knees are probably in water. So officially, when you do a baptism, most originally, you should entirely be immersed in water. And of course, that's quite a hassle. And later they could just stand in water with water sprinkled around the head, or like this in this picture, you could be almost out of the water as long as you sprinkle water. But there is almost always water involved in this situation. And it's a ceremony originally in the Jewish religion. So originally they have this thing called the Tevilah, which is the Jewish purification ritual of immersing a person into water. It is practiced, among other things, a conversion to Judaism. So when a person converts to Judaism, he should go through a kind of Jewish baptism, but it could also be other kinds of ceremony. But later on, when Christian become the thing, they adopted this Jewish practice, and it becomes very, very prevalent in Christian rites. And they would either baptize a baby or baptize a child before they could make any decision for themselves, or they would baptize an adult who specifically express their willingness to be baptized, which means that they would become a faithful Christian from now on. So there are different rules for different ages and so on. And it's performed by pouring water on the person or by immersing a person in the water partially or completely. And you can read it in Matthew 3:15, that John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Jesus went to his cousin John, and John is some kind of missionary. He's spreading this faith by baptizing people. So there's a long line of people waiting to be baptized, and Jesus came up to him and asked him to baptize himself. And John says, "You are higher than I am. I am not to do that to you." But Jesus says, "But times are different. I will let you do this to me when later I will be baptizing other people." And in telling this story in Matthew, which is one of the four Gospels in the first books of New Testament, we always quote each line in the Testament, whether it's new or old, with two numbers. Here we have 3:15. That means if you go to the book of Matthew, the book of Gospel according to Matthew, you go to the third section and the 15th sentence, you will find the line that mentioned John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Bible is the most studied book in the West. That's why you can easily mention which book, which chapter, which line, and everyone knows what you mean, and they could recite to you even. And in China, we don't have this kind of familiarity with the Christian Bible, but we have the Analect, which is Confucian 论语. 论语 is called the Analect. And the 论语者20篇, it's got 20 chapters or 20 books, and each one has a number of lines. Some are short, like one line. Some are very long, like 10 or 20 lines. But each one has a number. So if you say 学而 1:1, and everybody knows that's in the first chapter called the 学而, and it's the first line of it. 学而时习之，不亦乐乎？有朋自远方来，不亦乐乎？人不知而不愠，不亦君子乎? Yeah, that's what Confucius said, and was later anthologized by his students, all the sayings of Confucius by his disciples, and they were neatly arranged into 20 books and numbered. And when you mention something, and many people will be able to recite it in its entirety, but not as much as the Bible, because there are too many more people who study Bible as a living. This is a picture I took of the Dead Sea. You can see far away there's a Dead Sea. I took this picture on Mount Nebo, Nebo, and it was near the town of Moab, Moab. Here we have Moab in Utah, when you want to go to Arches National Park. So originally, there was a town called Moab, and there was a mountain called Mount Nebo. It is now in Jordan territory, not too far from Bethany, where Jesus was baptized by his cousin, John the Baptist. So if you look carefully, there is where River Jordan flows into the Dead Sea. And at that mouth of the river, or actually it's a little bit inside that mouth of the river, it was where Jesus was baptized. And why did I come to this mountaintop? Because Moses died here. We went to see where Moses died. And in the Bible, it says Moses went to Mount Nebo and he was no more. That means that he died here. However, Moses took lots of this Jewish people away from Egypt. They were slaves, and Moses took them away to a free land and wandered in this area near Jordan and Israel, and probably as far as you can see, or even more in this area. For 40 years, he did not find the promised land. But he's not descendant, his successor, I believe it was Joshua, he eventually took the people to Canaan, which became the land of milk and honey, the promised land promised by God to the Jewish people. So this is Mount Nebo, where Moses died. And on this map, you could see that this here is Dead Sea, and this here is the Sea of Galilee. And in between, there's River Jordan. It flew from high above here into the Sea of Galilee, where he lived most of his life in Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem, somewhere here, south of Jerusalem, because people told the emperor, Roman emperor, that someone will become the deliverer of the Jewish people, maybe to the emperor or to the Jewish king under Roman emperor. That would be King Herod. Yeah, King Herod issued the edict to kill all the firstborn son at that time. So Jesus' parents went from Nazareth. If you go to Nazareth, you could see both their parents' homes. And you go south of Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and you will see the Church of Nativity with the manger where Jesus was born. And he went here to be baptized, and he went to several other places. Among them, he was in Tiberia. He was preaching extensively in Tiberia, but eventually he died in Jerusalem. Okay, so with the bigger map, you could see that this red dot is where the baptism took place. And you could see Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, Syria, and Egypt, okay? And here where he was baptized, you could still see this, which is the ruin. I'm sure it's not the ruin. It was a spot where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, but this, I'm sure everything was built later. And this is another place where a Jewish kind of baptism takes place. And this is where I visited on March 24th of 2006. It was in Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Dead Sea Scrolls were carefully copied scriptures by the believers, and they stashed into a large crock of ceramic crocks, and they hid them in the mountain caves and they went to Jerusalem to participate in the revolution. However, none of them died. There were 50 some of them. And they used to live in this community, and this one in front of you is their cleansing pool, and you could see the Dead Sea far away into the picture. And this is where the cleansing pool used to be, which is called the mikveh. It was already in the year 66. It's between 66 and 70 that the Jewish revolt or revolution took place, when these monks who used to live here went to Jerusalem to participate. However, they were put down by the Roman soldiers, and none of them survived. But they were not Christians. They were Judaists. They believed in the old Jewish religion, and they took purification bath in this pool. Okay, and some other pictures taken by me was these steps, and you would enter when you're dirty, and you would walk out when you're clean. So there are two different entrances. And this is another mikveh I happened to see. It was in Speyer in Germany, on Rhine cruise, 莱茵河的cruise. And in this town, which mid-sized city, Speyer, they had a Jewish community with a synagogue and a mikveh, which is their cleansing. So you took the steps down, and you could see where they used to do their baptism. Baptism is the concept of unity. You become a Christian and you agree to be baptized, so you join the group of other people of the same religion. And in some Christian denominations, they consider it is necessary to reach salvation. You will be saved if you get baptism. But other branches of Christianity, they do not believe you have to be baptized. For example, Quakers and the Salvation Army, they do not do baptism at all. And some do it to infants, some do it to adults only. And this is apparently for infant, because it's a basin where you can put babies into it, and the adults could not possibly be baptized in this basin. It's even called the baptism jar, which means a very small water container. And this is a Portuguese one. I believe it means it was in Ceylon, which is, Xilan is to the southeast of India. And it's Catholic. The Portuguese means Catholic. And this baptism is an Orthodox. So it's not Catholic and not Protestant. And this is a thing that's in a church where adult can be baptized. And this is in Iowa, this church. And this is right by River Jordan, which men are lining up to be baptized. So it's either in Israel or in Jordan, because the river Jordan separate the two countries. This is a very controversial thing called the Proxy Baptism. That is, a person died without having been baptized, and someone else did being baptized in their behalf. So that's called proxy. A proxy is an agent who is not the person himself. And this is, in the old days, they do it to heretics, people who are not Christians. When after they died, they do some kind of baptism so that they would become Christian. And of course, this person did not want to do it, did not want to have it done on himself, but he had no say because he is dead. So this is quite a brutal thing to do to dead people. So it was not allowed by the formal church. It was banned, outlawed by both the Catholic Church, Orthodox Church, and the Protestant Church. They all stopped people from doing that. And currently, no church is doing that except the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church is now, on the last line, the Latter-day Saint, the Church of the Latter-day Saint movement. They are now the biggest Mormon church in Utah. They decided that they would want to do this after death for people who are dead, and they want to baptize that. Of course, if you are the children of a grandma or a mother or somebody who for some reason was not baptized and you wanted her to reach salvation, you probably wanted to have it done, even though it's questionable because they could not object to it. But by their law, in Mormon law, you could register to have a dead person baptized. So it is very controversial. However, even more controversial I believe it's a T. Oh, okay, it is a T. Even more controversial than having your relatives baptized is a practice of baptizing people who are definitely not your church's believer. So this is quite brutal to me. This is just outrageous to do this thing, huh? So this Mormon church, they decided they wanted to baptize dead people regardless of race, sex, creed, religion, or morality. So they chose people, not randomly, of course. They baptized successfully in their own way. They baptized Anne Frank, who wrote the Diary of Anne Frank, and they baptized Adolf Hitler, who committed the atrocity, including killing Anne Frank in the concentration camp. And they baptized lots of other peoples who are Jewish, actually. They died in the Holocaust, and they were baptized after death. And that made the Jewish people furious. They just did not want the thing to happen. What do you think? I would say you probably would agree with them because your ancestors, your loved ones, they belong to you. What they believe, how they lived, what they are, is not something to be trashed around by some other people by things like baptism, okay? So it is very arguably a good thing to have it done. And the Mormon Church issued lots of rules not to allow this, but however, things like that keep happening. Huh? Their rule is that dead people who died within the last 95 years, you cannot just by your own will baptize them, okay? And they even went back to their record and pick out those people and throw them out of the register. The next word is Menger. We need to go a little faster. Menger is also called a trough, which is the thing that you and I understand as where Jesus was born in and where people usually feed their horses or other animals or cow or goat or lamb. And sometimes they would put such thing in the wild to feed wild animals, for example, in a national park or something. In the winter, they were afraid that some of the animals might die, so they would put out water or feed or even salt. Animals need salt. And there would always be another manger or a trough used to hold water, because animals would need water too. And according to the Old Testament and according to the custom of people living around Bethlehem, they would put a newborn baby male lamb into a manger wrapped in cloth, and then they would conduct the sacrifice by killing this lamb, and the lamb would be pure and beautiful and happy because it's tightly wrapped in the cloth. So the lamb would be calm and unblemished. It's not just some dirty small sheep picked out from the pen, but it would be a cherished, clean, and well taken care of lamb. And the story of Jesus being put in this also has the symbolic meaning that he was to be sacrificed for the humankind. He was to die on the cross. Of course, he did not know that, neither did his parents, but it became the symbol. So the story is probably invented after he died, but that's how the story went, that he was put there to symbolize the sacrificial lamb for the humankind. Okay, so there's a story of baby Jesus in a crib in the manger. You can find it in Luke 2:7, and Luke is 路加福音. It's the fourth gospel in the first four books. And here I picked a few pictures of baby Jesus in the manger. And this one only showed the mother, who is center stage, and the father. But later ones also show lots of other animals and 3 important people. So in this picture, you see Maria and Joseph. They have this ring of the saint on top of their head, while the other 3 people, this one, and this one, they do not, because they are ordinary people. They are called the 3 magi. We mentioned this word M-A-G-I last time. The 3 magi, they were wise men, or the 3 kings of the Orient. They traveled far and wide following a star, and they found Jesus in the manger. So many of the nativity scene, you can see the 3 magi in the picture. And the so-called nativity, it means the birth. But in Christian, when you mention nativity, it means the birth of Jesus. And when you say nativity scene, it is the scene of Jesus, baby Jesus being born in the manger with the parents on his side. And there are other barn animals, and sometimes there are 3 wise men at the scene. They arrived like a week later, so they were not there in the beginning. But apparently, the parents and the baby stayed there until they came, and they were able to give the present of frankincense and myrrh to the parents. Okay, here's a word called Gentile. It is not a word to be found in the Bible anywhere. So it is a word invented by probably the Roman people to call anyone who's not a Jew, is called a Gentile. And in the past, it almost always mean a white person, but now it could be a colored person as well. And there's a word about meteorology. Okay, I'm looking at my clock. Meteorology is a branch of science that studies atmospheric sciences, including atmospheric chemistry and atmospheric physics, but it mainly deals with weather forecasting. So when you watch a TV news, here comes a person who is saying it's going to rain or not, and so on and so forth. They would call that person a meteorologist, even though he was just there to read the script. They won't give him a title, meaning he was a scholar in this field who knows everything about weather, but no, okay. Meteorology was a very ancient science, but it was rather simple and not scientific for thousands of years, both in China and in Europe and in many other cultures. There are people who explains the future, the fate of the world, or the fate of your future, or things like that, based on the stars or weather or something. And in China, we had this Zhuge Liang who could predict that in a couple of months or weeks, there will be some kind of weather change that would move bring along the western wind to blow during the Battle of Red Cliffs to burn all the ships of Cao Cao, thus creating this situation of 3 states dividing the entire country. These are all meteorologists who are not so scientific, I would say, because science did not advance to that time. And the law of physics and mathematics and astronomy, everything was developing so very quickly in the last 100 years or so. I'm sorry about that. Somebody needs to take care of that cattle. Okay, thank you. And so in the last few, in our own eyes, we witnessed how advanced meteorology developed in the past, say, 50 years in our lives. We used to laugh at people who predict weather incorrectly, but now they're getting better and better and better. Huh? And the ocean is also part of the factor in the weather. And here's the word meteor, which is a liuxing. You see a star or a debris or something or in the sky that flew into the atmosphere and leaving a trail of blazing light behind it. That's called a meteor. And meteor is come from ancient Greek language as something from outer space. So it's called meteor, okay? And this is a picture I took in 2015. It is a town in Greece, northern central Greece, called the Meteora. It is called the Meteora because this scenery, this view is so fantastic. They think it's from outer space. Something aliens came from outer space and created fantastical landscape. So there are monasteries built on top of these sheer cliffed mountain tops. And there are probably 24 of those monasteries, but only 6 are now allowed for people to visit. And they are just out of this world. When I saw this, I decided, wow, this is one of the place I visited. This is the best I could ever been to. So it's no wonder they call it Meteora. So we visited 3 of those 6 monasteries that are open for visitation. And this one is by far the biggest, and you can walk to it. from your car. Others, you could not. You have to climb up the hill. And you could conceivably jump into a basket and by pulled up this rope into that place. But we didn't try that. And these are the few words related to meteorology. And I pretty much talked about them a lot last time. And the word alliteration is not one about weather. It is a kind of rhyming with the initials. And the last word is called peer or peerage, which in one sense it means the historically legal peerage of aristocratic people in a country. As each country has different systems and different definition legally defining those people who are peers or peerage, belonging to the peerage. And this kind of peerage can be passed on to their offspring or cannot. So there are two kinds, at least in the English system. Each country has their different systems. We're not going to go into that. And some are inherited, meaning it can be passed on to the next generation. And some are life peers, which means they cannot be passed on to the next generation. And at least for the country of England, there are different peerages rules, different rules for England, which is up to the year 1707, and for Great Britain, which is from the year 1707 to 1800, and for United Kingdom. So those three entities have different rules, and they are by different laws. And we went over what England was called in our maybe the second or third of our classes. So it's probably in September we talked about how you call it England until 1707, and it changed to Great Britain after it joined forces with Scotland until 1800, and they joined forces with Ireland. So it becomes United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. That's starting from 1801. And this word peer can also mean our common people. You have your peer group and you suffer peer pressure, especially when you're in high school. Other people are exerting such strong influence on you that you often have to agree with them, or you want to be part of them. You don't want to be a loner. So that's called a peer group and peer pressure. And there's also the word crowd, which means a group of people, but there are no rules or no relationship in the crowd. They are just a random group of people. And there's another word called a herd, which is not such a strong peer group. A herd is usually used to describe a group of animals. For example, a herd of buffaloes or a herd of sheep. And in human, we use the word herd to describe a human being as a group. And here we need to know the word about herd immunity, which is the last word today. And it is once we had the vaccine, and most people reaching a certain degree are immune to this disease, then we could reach herd immunity. That means as a group, this disease can no longer rage without limitation. It'll become less and less people and passed along fewer and fewer times. And even in the end, none of this people with this disease existed. For example, we had smallpox that was eradicated in 1977 because enough people, I think maybe 95% of the people had gotten the smallpox vaccination, that the disease itself no longer existence anywhere in the world. That's what we hope to reach with this pandemic right now we are experiencing. And to talk about herd immunity, first of all, it has to be a contagious disease. If it's not contagious, then there's nothing, you can no longer talk about immune or vaccine because it's not contagious. Okay, so you could never achieve that. Let's go on to this song, which is Ben Johnson's "Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes." And I hope you would spend some time reading this and understanding what he was meaning, because it's not simple. Okay, this song is called "To Celia" by Ben Jonson. He called this "To Celia," but it's popularly known as "Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes." And in this poem, which is not very long, but it's rather complicated and old. Ben Jonson was a poet in Shakespeare's time, so it's probably 400 years old. Drink to me only with thine eyes. He had in mind this beautiful woman that she loved. He loved this beautiful woman. Okay, so this song is written to Celia. So all the you in this song is Celia. Drink to me only with thine eyes. Only with your eyes you can drink to me. You don't need to hold a cup of wine or something to toast to me. You don't have to say cheer to me. You don't have to say salute or good health or whatever. You just look at me with your eyes and as if you're drinking to me, okay? And I will pledge with mine. And you wish a good luck to me and I will pledge my good luck, pledge you good luck. I will pledge is to make a pledge, is to make a wish. or leave a kiss within the cup, 或者 you can leave a kiss in a cup even without any wine, and I will not ask for wine, because that's enough for me to get drunk, just by looking at you kissing that cup with even no wine in it. It doesn't take any wine to make you become drunk. I would just look at it and I'll be swept up by you, just by seeing you kissing that cup. The thirst that from the soul doth rise, doth ask a drink divine. The thirst from my soul, a thirst arises. 我发出这种饥渴的感情，从我的灵魂里哈。Does ask a drink divine, and ask for a divine drink. I ask for a drink that is holy. But might I of Jove's nectar sip, I would not change for thine. The original script or lyrics is sup, S-U-P, which means eat. And when we say supper, it was the meal that was at the end of the day. So this is might I of Jove's nectar sup, but people change it to sip to better understand the word, but it was sup when Johnson wrote it. And this is half of the sentence, which says, even if I could have a cup of delicious drinks given to me by God, Jupiter, or Zeus. Jupiter is a Greek god who is controlling all the gods in Greek mythology, and the same god is called Zeus in Roman mythology. So even if God would give me a cup of his best drink, I would not change for mine, which means I would rather have the one from you, not from Jove, okay? So this is how much he loved this woman. I sent thee late a rosy wreath. So I sent you a wreath, which is a huahuan, made of roses, not so much honoring thee. Usually when I give somebody a rosy wreath, I want to honor this person, to praise this person for her beauty or honesty, or for whatever reason I want to honor this person. But I send you a rosy wreath. It's not so much because I want to honor you. It is because I want to give it a hope. I give this rosy wreath a hope, as giving it a hope that there it could not wither be, because I sent it to you and you took it and maybe you breathe on it, and magically this rosy wreath would never wither. Because of you, you breathe on it, and you decided not to keep it, and you sent it back to me. Maybe you didn't like me or whatever. But since when it grows and smells, I swear, not of itself, but thee. After you gave it back to me, it lives, even though it's a wreath. It's cut, but it grows and the smell of you. Because I loved you so much, it seems to me that just because you breathe on it before you return to me, forever this will never be dried or withered, and it will always smell of you. It is a very, very moving poem to be sent to somebody you love, deeply love. Okay, and it was not exactly Ben Jonson's invention. He read an ancient Greek poem. This writer was in the 2nd or 3rd century. His name is this, Philostratus the Athenian. 他是一个雅典人, and he wrote this very erotic poem, and Ben Jonson read it and was so moved that he practically took it as his own. The entire thing, he did not really translate it, but he digests the whole thing and spit it out as his own, which you can follow line by line. It was from the original poem, which is called a epistle, and it's a love letter. And he did it so well that this person said, its glory is Johnson's. So he really made it magical by his rephrasing this poem. It's safe to say that no other work by Ben Jonson is so well known. It's his most famous work. For one thing, it's so simple and short that people can easily memorize it. That's why it became so popular, and it is very moving. Okay. There's Jove, and there's actual. Okay, this is a person. Some of his contemporary made a painting of him. He was born in 1572 and he died in 1637. It was about Shakespeare's time. I have Shakespeare's time a little later, huh? And he is very, very famous and had a lasting influence upon English poetry and stage comedy. He wrote stage scripts, plays, and mostly comedies. Okay, do I have Shakespeare? No, but Shakespeare was born a little earlier than him and died a little earlier than him. So they both straddled two monarchs. They were Elizabeth I and the one after him, who is called James I in England and James VI in Scotland. So this king, because Elizabeth did not have any children, she was never married, well, did not have any known children. There were rumors about her giving birth to different babies, but there was none that was legal. And so after Elizabeth died, they had to, the English court had to go out to Scotland to grab their king, who was James VI, so that James VI could be at the same time also king of England, but James I of England, okay? And he's the second most important English dramatist after William Shakespeare. That's a pretty good honor, being second only to Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is right there on top. Nobody could surpass him during the reign of James I. Jonson was he loved to write all kinds of things, including controversial political essays or personal or artistic and intellectual. He wrote a lot of different things, including comedies and the poetry. But his one poem is the most famous of them all, even though he wrote two poems titled To Celia, but this one is much more famous than the other one. This is something about the Greek writer who wrote all these things, but we don't have time for that. And this is a Greek person's thing, okay. Okay, and then we come to this, I hope to finish in 10 minutes, which is 闲情赋, huh? And I gave you this link. So anybody who did not get the handout I sent out via line group chat and email, you can contact me if you want to get future, well, even past and future handout. In this handout, I have this website. You could click it and reach one of many, many websites that contains the entire script, the entire text of 闲情赋, huh? 闲情means a pure and decent poem to a lady who is beautiful and honorable and so on and so forth. Okay, so this thing is this long. You could see there are 5 paragraphs. You probably can't read all of them, but there are 5 paragraphs, and we're only going to read the center one, the third one, which is his 10 wishes. He wrote 10 wishes, each one followed with the sad thing about this wish, that he would not get what he wants because this is all temporary. And there are 5 paragraphs, and the first paragraph is to say why he wrote this. People will say that he is so, how do you say, so crude and admiring a woman to such an extent that it becomes almost too impolite to admire a person that way. So he had to use the first paragraph to explain why he wrote it, because there were people before him, such as Zhang He, who wrote Ding Qingfu, and Cai Yong, who wrote Jing Qingfu. And they are decent and reputable people. So I tried to imitate them by writing this, and hope that even though I'm not as good as a writer, I hope that it will make you happy by reading this. And the second paragraph is that he just loved this woman so much. He described this woman being so beautiful and so chaste, so honest, so pure, so everything. He spent the entire second paragraph describing this lady, how she walked, how she behaved, how she wear different things, and this and that. So this is another paragraph. And the third paragraph, we're going to read line by line. And the fourth paragraph is, after all my wishes, it is possible that I'll never, ever be with her again. So life is just so miserable. Nothing will ever be the same because she is no longer there. That's why many people think this is written to his deceased wife. His first wife died when he was 30 years old. And this is a paragraph that shows him being so sad and devastated and depressed and just pessimistic, thinking his life is going nowhere. And the last paragraph is him saying that even though I am totally hopeless, I still can secretly admire her from a distance. So we're coming to this 10 wish, this part, which is the middle part of it. And he wishes that he could be some part close to this lady so that he would be able to enjoy this close proximity to her. However, from the third line on, it would be how sad it's not going to last. So you have the word wish in front of all 10 lines. And in the middle, that is after at the beginning of the third part of this line, there's the word bei, which means I'm just devastated. I'm so sad. My sorrow is that. Okay. So the first thing he wished is that he could, if you talk about this lady's clothing, which is her blouse, the top of her dress, I wish I could be the collar. If I were the collar on her clothes, then I could receive the fragrance from her beautiful head wafting onto me, and I would breathe in this beautiful fragrance. However, she could take it off in the evening and change into a different clothing, and then I will be separate with her and no longer near to her. And I blame that the night does not end so that she could conceivably see the daylight and took off her nightgown and put this top on, then I could be close to her again. So essentially, he says, I wish I would be the collar of her clothes so that I could enjoy all these things. However, at night she would take off that clothing, and how I feel sorry because the night is so long. The second line is, I wish to be the belt on her skirt. That's another part of her clothing. If I were her belt, I could be tightening her very narrow waist, her very dainty body, and I would be around her. However, here he didn't use the word sad. He said, however, when the weather or temperature of the rooms changes, there'll be cold or hot temperature, and she would take off one skirt and change into another one, and then I'll be dead. Okay. And the third line is, when we talk about her hair, I would like to be the oil on her hair. Then I would be on her hair, and when she combed the hair, and the oil would pass all these fragrance along the hair and streaming on this beautiful body from the hair covering the body. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I read the wrong line. He is now on the hair, and she would brush the black hair onto the shoulder, the drooping shoulder, and she is said that this beautiful woman she was talking about would take a bath from time to time, and when that happens, there will be no longer oil on the hair. He would be gone, and he would not be there to be with her. And the fourth line is that on her eyebrow, I wish I would be the dark pencil that colors her eyebrow. 这个带 means black, and 眉毛 is the eyebrow. He would like to be the coloring pencil that put the dark color on her eyebrow, so that whenever she looks around her, and she would lift her eyes in a delicate manner, and I would be there. I would be there, okay? However, the sad thing is, even though her makeup is still fresh and good looking, she might decide to put on the new makeup, and I would be gone again, okay? The fifth line is, if I were a piece of river grass, which is guan or guan. Here I have a picture of this river grass, which we talked about when we talk about 蒹葭, which is 秦风的诗叫做蒹葭，蒹葭苍苍，白露为霜，所谓伊人，在水一方。In that poem, we talked about 蒹葭, which is a kind of not rush, okay, it's a kind of wild grass, reed, R-E-E-D, which is a kind of grass growing next to the river, which is another kind of water grass. This one is a kind that is not like that grass, which is a kind of real grass, but it's also a monocot with leaves in tube shaped. So this is a sturdy and solid and water repellent, and this is often used to make mats. And our poet, he's wishing that he could be one of the grass that made the mat for her to sit on. Okay, 愿在官而为席，安若体于山丘. Then all the way through summer until the 3 autumn months came, her dainty, how do you say that? It's so saying that her body is weak, but it is saying it's gentle and elegant. Her body would be resting on me when I was part of the mat. However, I'm very sad that pretty soon the autumn would be over and winter would come, and she would no longer use a mat. I would be gone because she would use a comforter or a quilt that is beautifully embroidered, or with patterns that are beautiful. So the one means with beautiful patterns, sometimes embroidered or quilted, and in means thick cotton quilt or comforter. And that thing would replace me to cover her, and she would no longer be anywhere near me, and I would have to wait until next 放今年而求见而见求 It would be a year. I mean, many 2 seasons would pass before she would decide to look for me. So that's the sad thing about it. Then it's the 6th one. It says that if I were a silk, I would like to be the silk that made her shoes. And I would be wrapping around her pure and white, beautiful, small feet. And she would carry me around, 周旋, She would walk here and then there, and I would always be with her. But the sad thing is sometimes she would stop somewhere and kick away this shoe or change into a slipper or a pair of slipper or something else, or just walk bare feet. And I would be abandoned by her in front of the bed. And the next line is when it's daytime, I wish I were her shadow. This is even more abstract because he's not going to be a thing. He would be a shadow. He would always be with her, following her everywhere, to the east and to the west. However, the sad thing is there are sometimes high trees that put down a lot of shadow. So when she walked under a tree, I would not be there. Okay? And the next line is, in the night, I wish I were a candle. I would brighten her face so that she could look around while she was walking around next to the window or doors or whatever it was. So I would provide the light for her. However, the next morning, the sun would come out in the east. Fusang is east, which means the sun. And we call Japan Fusang because Japan is a country to the east of China. So at dawn, light would come and she would blow up the candle, and there will no longer be light of the candle. There will be sunlight, and I would not be there anymore. And if I were a bamboo, I wish I would be made into a fan. And she would softly hold on to this fan and wave it so it provides cool air for her. And the sad thing is, when autumn comes, there will be dewdrops or the 节气, the 节气, the seasonal festival called Bailu, which means white dewdrops. When that day comes, it'll no longer be hot, and she would no longer need any fans to be with her. So she would put me away, and I would no longer be close to her clothes or to her sleeves, and I'll be far away from her. And the last wish is, if I were a piece of wood, I wish I were from a 桐树, a 桐树, sometimes we call it a parasol tree, or we could call it Famiana. That is the Latin name for that 桐树. I wish I were the wood, the lumber came from the tree. That's the Famiana tree. And the Chinese, the best zithers, Z-I-T-H-E-R, were made of wood from that tree. In that case, she would put me on her laps and play music. How wonderful it would be. But the sad thing is, when all that happening ends and the sadness or sorrow came to her, she would push the musical instrument away and stop playing the music, and I would no longer be there with her. So this 10 very beautiful and passionate passages describe this man who was so very deeply in love with a woman, this beautiful and chaste and pure woman who would walk around about her regular daily practice, while this man wishes that he could be attached to any of these 10 things and be close with her. This is very, very degrading for a man, for Chinese. This is the greatest sin that the writer, the poet, has committed. So to so obviously be subjugating himself as a slave to this woman, this is just awful for any other Chinese scholars to read about it. So for many years, people just scolded him for writing this very, how say, indecent poem about a man's insane love for women. So even Tao Yuanming was a very, very popular poet, but we all know a lot of poems he wrote, but very few people came across this lovely thing that he wrote, because people consider it a great sin for this wonderful poet to have committed such a crime by writing an erotic poem. Okay, this is what this is about. And we talk about when he wrote this. Some people say he wrote it when he was 19 years old, but many people consider that he wrote it when he was 30 years after his wife died. And his first wife, was considered a very good, beautiful, chaste. I keep on saying chaste. Chaste meaning 非常的有贞洁, chaste. And immediately after the wife died, he married another woman. This woman is also a good woman and have similar interest and education as he, and was hardworking and so on. And maybe he wrote this for his second wife. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway. So that's about it. I want to show you something about Xiao Tong, who collected. Xiao Tong was the person, Zhao Ming Taizi, who conducted the group of people who created the anthology called Zhao Ming Wenxuan, a great person. And before him, even though this poet, Tao Yuanming, he wrote many good poems, but he was not famous. There were many other famous poems during his time, such as 谢灵运啊、谢跳啊，或者是谢灵运、谢跳 and one person. Yu Xin. All these are much more famous than Tao Yuanming. And later on, Xiao Tong came along, the Prince Zhao Ming came along, and he's the one, theoretically, he was the one who conducted research and dug up Tao Yuanming's work. And later on, he wrote the entire he collected and edited the entire collection of what's this called? Tao Yuanming, Tao Yuanming Quanji. It was done by Xiaotong. However, he was disgusted to read this poem that we just went over, and he thought Tao Yueming did this was a disgusting thing to do, okay? So this 10 wishes and the 10 sad things is the most famous part of this poem, even though it has 5 paragraphs. Everyone just read this part about his 10 wishes. And there was never a respectable man who would degrade himself so much as to describing another woman as so high above and being adored by him. Okay. Okay. That's it for today, actually. Oh boy, it surely took a lot of time. Every week I decided this would be the week that I'd only take 2 hours. But then as time goes on, it became more and more. I added more picture and more slides. It becomes like 100 slides long. But that seems to be always the situation with me. Okay. Any comment?
No, thank you, Joel.
Yeah, I believe not too many people have read this Tao Yueming's poem, and I think it's just so lovely. And if you like, you can go on YouTube to look for Ye Jiaying's. Actually, she discussed many, many poems in history, but this one was not recorded. This one was somebody